Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started here. I know we've already got 20 people online, which is great, and then obviously all of you who are here. My name is Tally Birch, and I'm on the board of Commonwealth North. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you all for being here to engage on this critical issue. The view from here, the future of education in our state. I'm going to keep my introductory comments to a minimum because we do have a limited time. We will be out of here at 5:15, and I know we want to hear from the experts in the crowd and then be able to take comments from the audience. I'd like to begin by thanking our event sponsors today. We have NEA Alaska and then Saltchuk, and then our cornerstone sponsors for Commonwealth North, which is GCI and ConocoPhillips. Again, thanks for being here. I think it's really important to highlight that Commonwealth North is all about civic engagement and bringing people together on the critical policy issues for our state. For those of you who aren't familiar with the organization, it's been around since 1979, so it got a bit of a jump start on me, but only so. And it's got a rich history of getting Alaskans engaged on the issues that are critical to our state in a way that's really fact-based, policy-based, and nonpartisan, which I think is really key to driving a lot of the critical issues before us. It was started by former governors Egan and Hickel, who at the time were political sort of adversaries, and they came together to have thoughtful forums, introduce study groups, and do other things to drive forward the policies within our state. I'd like to begin by thanking our panelists here today. We've got Gina Bishop, who's the Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development, Catherine Walker, our 2024 Alaska Teacher of the Year from Diamond High School. We've got Brandon Strauch, Principal at Rilkashula, and we've got Carl Jacobs, who's presently the Vice Chair of the Anchorage School Board. So thank you all for showing up today and giving us your time. So the format of the panel today is going to be pretty straightforward. Each of the panelists is going to have 10 years to present, or 10 years. I promise you it won't feel that way. 10 minutes, and only 10 minutes we will have cards to present their view on the future of education in our state, and they've each brought slide packs, so it should be very dynamic. And after that, we will be taking audience Q&A. There's going to be a mechanism electronically for soliciting And while we have Ross here, we will begin with our first panelist, which we do have Commissioner Bishop that's going to be going first. So I think she's... There we go. Thank you.
Just stand here and progress. Good afternoon, or almost good evening, everyone. My name is Dina Bishop, and I'm the Commissioner of Education for the Department of Education and Early Development. And I'd like to share that this is my 35th year in the state of Alaska as an educator. And my career started in the Fairbanks North Star Borough as a substitute teacher when I initially graduated back in 1990. And then since then, I have worked as a teacher, a coach, an assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and then superintendent down here in South Central Alaska for both the Mat-Su Borough School District and the Anchorage School District. So I am really honored here to speak to you today about a couple of things. And the idea was to share an education focus and how it looks to the future, but to also ground that in policy as well as real-world experiences. And so I have just a few slides to share some policy at the State Board of Education level, as well as with Governor Dunleavy and his education priorities. So with that, at the department, we do like to start with our mission, vision, and purpose. And really this middle one is what I like to say is really our goal. And the middle one envisions what children will be like when they leave us. And so contributing young adults in their community is essential. So we want a great education every day. However, it's not showing up on the Zoom, so I can hold it up if they need to. Yeah, that works better. Okay, I'm just gonna do it a new way. Here you go. So an excellent education for every student every day. But again, that middle vision is key. In 2016, the State of Alaska State Board of Education, with the former member, is here present with us today, Mr. Bob Griffin, and this education challenge was finalized. And it's in 5 areas that supports all students to read by grade level at the end of 3rd grade, improve the safety and well-being of students, partnerships, families, and communities, prepare, attract, and retain educational professionals, close the achievement gap, and increase career and technical and culturally relevant education. And so those were 5 areas. And this really was born out of Governor Walker's leadership and included about 300 individuals that came together certain times during the year, but included over 4 to 5, I believe is between 4 and 5,000 pieces of input in regard to what Alaskans want for education. So this was and has been the guide forward. Oops, I forgot to don't do that. All right. So I want to start with something that's most important because as the invite shared, it's really about the financial resources we have in Alaska and how are we going to move public education forward. And this statement, investment alone is not enough, I would say, encapsulates really the work that we're doing presently in the legislative bills for which the governor has presented. And his goal is to have an investment in public education, as well as have strong language that supports families, education, public schools, career technical education, teacher retention and recruitment. His initial omnibus bill really looked at a plethora of those items in the challenge, as well as in his priorities outlined within his priorities. Dollars agree, there is an agreement. More funding is needed in our public schools, but it can't be funding alone. To move the needle on student learning and outcomes, more than just money is needed. Policy is needed. And I'll give some examples of that. The Alaska Reads Act, which is the second bullet here, as well as empowering parents and having transparent accountability. The governor's priorities are really encapsulated into these 3 items: families and student options, targeted investments, and ensure educational rights and safeguards. And the legislation that we have proposed has been surrounding these items. You take a look, one of the first ones was inspire tribal and community ownership through tribal compacting. We do have HB 59 out now that really works collaboratively with 5 demonstration tribes in Alaska. It was born out of Senator Stevens' Senate Bill 34, which asked for a demonstration of tribal compacting if it could work in our state to meet the needs of Alaska Native students, as well as other students in our public schools that would like to attend a tribally compacted public school. Increase the flexible learning opportunities, support student growth and innovation in charter schools, and expand access to all public schools. So you might have heard open enrollment, charter schools being able, right now in the legislation that he has proposed that we shared last week, was for charter schools to be able to receive and acquire their fund balance like districts have allowed in Anchorage and Matsu, but not all charters around Alaska are able to do that, to support charter schools and clarify language in the statute of when a charter is turned in and when it should be reviewed. It's shortening the timelines for the State Board of Education for their processes as well. And of course, the increased flexible learning opportunities is key here. And it really, I want to share some data that is grounded in our most present and pressing data. And it really is, where are our parents choosing to send their students to school? And I did have some, I just want to share some, in some testimony this year, we talked about school choice. And I really am under the belief that every school that a child goes to is either a choice or a non-choice. If you can afford to move into a neighborhood of the school that you actually want to go to and you can sell your house and move there, that's a choice, just like attending a charter school that is German immersion. That is just like a choice of attending a statewide correspondence school. If you are in a neighborhood that isn't a choice, but it's the one that you get, that might be a non-choice. The governor wants to open up open enrollment. 1 out of every 5 students in our state choose just either charters or correspondence, and it's growing. So his bill outlined a way in which charter districts are actually paid to have their charter school programs within the funding formula. But we can't ignore the data and the choices and the movement where Alaska's families are going. Another point of success in the real world as evidence is Alaska's charter schools. The National Assessment of Education Progress last year shared, it's a Harvard publication called Education Next. So in 2023, they did the first ever study of only charter schools. And what they did is use the National Assessment of Education Progress, which is the federal government's assessment of all state schools. It's a random sample around the country, and pulled out only charter schools. We weren't able to get those data individually, as individual schools are not provided that information. However, it did find that Alaska's charter schools perform the best. So the intent is to allow parents and teachers, excellent parents and teachers, to continue to grow those innovative ideas. As I'm almost out of time, I'm going to go quickly. The next item relevant to policy is the READS Act, which has been highly successful in its first measurement year, which was last year. This year will be the second year of accountability. And Alaska READS Act outlined the type of pedagogy, science of reading, evidence-based reading skills, but also mandated connections with parents once a month on a child's progress, as well as support in summer school and professional development for teachers. It was passed in 2022 and was bipartisan piece of legislation, and most likely the most significant in my lifetime, in my 35 years. In the first year, we did see great improvement. We outpaced the nation. These slides on the right here are demonstrating we made up growth faster than the nation in Alaska. So if you look at just kindergarten, 76% of our kids started below grade level, not on grade level, or not on the grade level skills they should have when they enter kindergarten, and 60 left with the skills they're going to need in first grade. So we're turning that around and we're outpacing the nation. For other examples, the governor in his bill also had a learning growth and incentive grants. If we believe that public schools should teach kids and they should grow, and that's the purpose, whether they grow and meet the achievement or simply growing to hit that achievement target, this is an incentive for school districts to receive $450 per student. So the last thing is cell phones and a focus on the environment in his priorities, which is on cell phones and the prohibition of cell phones during the school day. And I can share lots of research on that. But with that, those are the policy items that are present today in Alaska's legislature, as well as the reasoning and the grounding behind the focus of funding public schools, yes, but also accompanying that with the policy that is going to matter for our students. Thank you.
Okay. So do I need to go to a different slide deck? Or you set up screen for us?
Yeah.
That's touch screen from here, right?
Well, let me see if it shows up on the screen because bear with me as I. By the way, this is part of your minutes, so you're going to have to do an 8 now. Nope, it's not letting me do this. I'm sorry. Looks like you have to do the same thing, so just. I'm using a webinar that doesn't do it quite as seamlessly.
Touch physical.
Yeah, or you can just move it down using this.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. All right, I'm on. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Carl Jacobs, Vice Chair of the ASD School Board. Pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to move quickly, both because I'm the guy who packed 4 pairs of jeans for the weekend trip, and I have way too many slides, but also because Ross just took 2 more minutes. So we'll start quick. Role of the school board, we're starting with the basics. The intent here is to speak to ensuring everyone's on the same page. Our board, as well as each of the boards in the more than 50 school districts in Alaska, are focused on ensuring the highest educational outcomes and opportunities for students. We're responsible for district operations, although we do our best to stay out of superintendent's way. And then we're setting the directions for goals and guardrails and ensuring our district is pointed in the right direction to support our department's mission, which Commissioner Bishop just outlined. In Anchorage, we have 3 goals, and they're supported by guardrails that are focused on, well, we'll just get right to it. The first is primarily K-3 reading proficiency. We also have a math proficiency goal, and then ensuring students are college, career, and life ready. The focus of these goals really is allowing the district to ensure that we provide the best opportunities for all students, and then are allowing students to facilitate and earn these skills that have turned into our portrait of a graduate that we've developed. Both of the goals, guardrails, as well as the portrait of a graduate have been a product of a process that was born out of significant community involvement. We're talking town halls, listening sessions. We have had significant surveys that have gone out, and they are goals and guardrails that our community wants and desires. And this portrait of a graduate really represents the future that our workforce needs. And so they're critical. We're proud of those, and we are working every day as a district, and then the board is focused whenever we're meeting to ensure that we're pointed in the direction of achieving these goals. All right, we're talking about headwinds. This is a bit of a prescient topic for anyone not who has opened up a newspaper here recently. We're talking about budget cycles, and one of the major functions of a school board is to pass and adopt an operating budget. We know that the state of Alaska operating budget, as well as the school district, runs July through June. The governor has to introduce, and the process really starts when the governor introduces a budget by December 15th, which is an Alaska statute. One of the challenges that our district faces uniquely is our municipal government operates on a calendar year budget. That leaves us with an opportunity in Anchorage Municipal Code to pass a budget by the first Monday in March. It's significantly earlier than, in almost all cases, than we know when any additional funding will be added. And we know that, speaking to the last point, that the foundation formula and the base student allocation hasn't been adjusted for inflation. And really, more years than not, it hasn't been adjusted, although the state often supplements with one-time funds. But that leaves there to be a bit of a guessing game, which has caused some challenges locally, and I think is a source of much of the conversation happening in Juneau. And from a pure policy standpoint, no matter if you think that the BSA should be cut, kept the same, or raised, there's a policy point to be made that our current system is fundamentally broken, and it has to be fixed. And that's something that requires bipartisan attention and support immediately. To articulate that point, I really appreciate this graphic because it speaks to hiring and our budget cycle in particular. So this chart in particular highlights that the ASD budget adoption occurs in March. We track that as earlier in the year when teachers are making their choice. Oftentimes we have budget uncertainty. The legislative session typically sees a budget adoption in May or June. In the most current fiscal year budget for the district, FY25 was adopted in late February, and our state operating budget was adopted in late June. Unfortunately, because the state government was in alignment that there was additional resources needed for schools, but wasn't clear on what those resources looked like, it led to a scenario where our district had to guess an appropriate amount. And as often can happen with guesses, they tend not to be 100% accurate. And that leads to a challenging allocation of resources and significant instability among staffing. When we have a teacher recruitment and retention challenge in Alaska, those things aren't good. And again, something we desperately need to change. So we tried something different this year as a board. Oftentimes we'll hear in floor debates, in legislative committees, that there's concern and interest in additional accountability by ensuring that the funds that are allocated, whether it be through the formula or in addition to and outside of the formula, are spent on the classroom. My colleague Kelly Lessons and I collaborated on amendments which would have assured the legislature that a roughly $1,000 BSA increase would be spent almost entirely in classroom instruction. Things like reducing classroom sizes down to FY17 levels, retaining nurses, librarians, school counselors, supporting the Alaska Reads Act through high-dose tutoring. It was an ambitious amendment that really laid to rest any concern, for at least Anchorage's sake, where the money would be spent, where resources would be spent, and it was intended to give legislators peace of mind to wisely invest in our schools. Ironically, for those who were following the veto override vote in committee meetings leading up to the HB 69 vote this week, one of the primary arguments actually began to move away from education funding and where resources would go, but more towards fiscal limitations. And I think that's telling that we have another underlying issue that we really need to address, and that's the lack of a sustainable long-term fiscal plan in our state. Frankly speaking, we can no longer depend on the volatility of oil prices and permanent fund earnings to support government services that our communities and state desire and require. With that said, we also intended to give the legislature this picture of what a budget would look like should the amendments have been passed and implemented. It really would have implemented a budget that was 95% focused on student direct instruction, supports, and the resources they need to have a warm and safe classroom. The district administration portion, I'll just highlight, and I'm especially proud of our district. We're one of the most efficient in the state in terms of raw dollars spent on district administration, and we continue to reduce that figure every year. Also want to highlight the amazing partners we have in our community with UAA and at ICER. They presented a really great slide deck to the House and Senate Education Committees that highlighted that Alaska is now 15% below the national average when you adjust Alaska's per student funding at the state level to account for inflation and geographic differential. It's a significant figure when we're looking at raw dollars and comparing that to what a dollar actually spends like. I know as someone who goes and visits relatives out of state that things at the grocery store and at the gas pump just tend to look different. And that doesn't surprise, when we look at data like this, it doesn't surprise me. And so I think it's something to keep in mind. I also appreciated that their report highlighted that Alaska faces some of the most challenging and excessive costs related to things like healthcare and exorbitant energy costs as well, which drive operations and steal resources from the classroom, frankly. It's another opportunity for policy, much needed action from Juneau. I'm going to talk about recruitment and retention for educators briefly. I don't know how much time I have left. 2.5 minutes. Oh, plenty of time. We're great. I've only got like 10 more slides. This is national data from 21-22, highlighted that there's a slight positive delta of about 95,000 teachers who left the profession than those who joined the profession and completed a traditional teacher preparation program. That's relevant, I think, when we look at Alaska-specific data, which says that 22% of the 1,634 teachers in that same year left the profession in Alaska. 13% left the profession entirely. And I think there's a significant cause for concern when we see that only the University of Alaska is only certificating just well under 200 new teachers. Again, a similar way of presenting the same data. I won't belabor that point, but I think it goes to show that we need to be asking the question, how can we retain and recruit the next generation of educators, frankly, in a world where we will have to recruit from the lower 48 and often overseas, as well as continuing to grow our own. Some data regarding the first teacher vacancy rate over time, and then some policy choices that the district has made to address those vacancies. Things like J1 visa teachers, hiring back retirees, and adding supplemental wages. Really appreciate this slide here, and I want to highlight that with what remains of my 1.5 minutes or so. The State of Alaska Department of Education helped facilitate a survey of roughly 4,000 educators and had some supplemental interviews conducted. Our educators spoke clearly, both who are currently employed as well as who left the profession. The things that our educators want to be retained in the state is our competitive salaries, affordable health care, and a defined benefit retirement plan. If we want to get serious about addressing the teacher recruitment and retention crisis, we need to start listening to educators. And there's policy mechanisms in place in the legislature that could help us effectuate that choice. Really quickly, I'm going to highlight some academic growth because it was a prompt in our slide deck that we were asked to present. Really proud of the K-1 reading proficiency growth that occurred between spring of 23 and 24 of 10%. We do have more graduates on track, as well as the graduation rate has jumped, and proud of that growth. And then appreciate collaborative methods like the co-teaching model, where we are trying to facilitate growth in MAP for math scores as well. We've implemented some other things. I don't have time, so I'll leave it there, but things like the professional learning community model, or PLCs, giving teachers more time to collaborate. Really proud of those things. Our goal is to not wait for funding to implement policy ideas and strategies to facilitate student outcome growth. However, funding is a necessary and critical part of that equation. My contact information, should you want to learn even more about my 20-page slide deck. Thank you, everyone.
We're gonna try this again.
All right. Ready?
All right, well, I'm Brandon Stroke. I'm the principal of Rilke Shula, and I've been an educator in Alaska for 15 years. Today, I'm really going to talk about educational funding from a charter school perspective and how we've responded to limited resources over the last couple of years. But I really want to ground ourselves in our why, right? Like our other presenters have as well. So the impact of education, right? Why do we do these things? Well, to me, it's really twofold, right? There's the enlightenment of the individual, right? Empowering the individual to make their own choices in life and make decisions and go after their aspirations, right? But there's also the perpetuation of our society and culture. And this is really where the federal government, state, district, community, play a role on what they want to see for our children, because that's what we get to decide as the adults, right? We get to decide how we're going to set this up for our children. We want a certain outcome. How are we going to create an environment that fosters that? So once again, we see the federal government has certain goals, state, district, and charter school. I'm going to be talking quite a bit about charter school goals and our response to limited resources today. So, of course, spending demonstrates priorities, right? So if I think about my household budget, I'm considering going on another vacation or investing in retirement. That's a choice, right? And that's really me prioritizing something in my own life. Well, our state, school district, even the charter schools, right? They make prioritizations on what they want. So if we consider state funding in the Alaska Reads Act, which is brought up earlier, right? There's funding associated with that to get that initiative off the ground. If I think about our school district and how it allocates funds to a number of different programs to support them, whether alternative programs, neighborhood programs, immersion programs, right? Those are priorities for the district. And they're really setting that priority by spending on that, that initiative. Well, charter school is super, super localized, right? So a charter school has its own APC board. This is almost like a mini school board that operates underneath the policies of the school district, the laws of the state. But it's a local group of people that are really deciding on their own priorities. What do they want for their children? What type of opportunities do they want? And so when we are creating our budget, and our budget even has to be submitted earlier. For example, I submitted our FY26 budget in December of 24. It's like a year and a half later, I'm trying to project what funding is going to be at the end of 26 and 2020, I'm sorry, June of 2026. we have really made a focus on our educators, right? We want educators in our building to deliver meaningful instruction that's going to support our vision and our mission and our school goals. And so that's become a high priority for us. Historically, Rilke Shule has operated with this budget of about 80% going towards staffing and 20% going towards facility. So, but this hasn't been sustainable the last few years. So when expenses are rising and resources are limited, we've had to make a lot of decisions and strategically, right? So we're strategically allocating our funding reserves, and I'll get into each one of these points a little bit more. Really focusing on increasing student enrollment, developing creative and collaborative solutions with stakeholders, and of course, our community engagement. And that's really a huge resource that we have as a charter school. So strategically allocating reserve funds, right? We have been using these reserve funds in order to maintain staff. Because once again, that's a priority for us. We want those educators in the building making a difference working with those children. We came into this school year with $1,600,000 roughly in that account. However, this school year is budgeted to spend $600,000 out of that reserve. Next school year, our budget is spend $700,000 out of that account. If you do the math, that's $1,300,000. It leaves about $300,000 in that reserve account. This is not a sustainable system, right? We need to take on other strategies in order to survive. And once again, coming back to the idea, what do we want for our children? Well, increasing student enrollment. Coming out of COVID pandemic, our student numbers were down. So this has been a high priority to build up our student enrollment once again. And so we've made this a huge focus, social media, marketing, giving school tours. But the biggest one, honestly, is that face-to-face, person-to-person recommendation. That's the biggest one. Families are going out there and sharing that they appreciate being at our school, that they like what's going on there, and they're sharing with their friends, they're sharing with their family members. And that's the biggest impact that we've seen with spreading the word about our charter school. And of course, we're looking to reduce expenses and come up with creative solutions to provide resources. All of these items right here on this list are not in our budget. We don't allocate any school funding for these items. We don't have school supplies like markers, paper, anything like that. We don't have a student activity fund. We don't have funding for curricular materials like textbooks. We don't have funding for student technology like Chromebooks. We don't have funding for professional development at our charter school level. And right now we have very, very minimal funding for a facility. I'm going to talk about all of these and how we've come up with solutions. Our community, right? Our community comes together because they want to create a certain type of educational environment. And that's super, super important. So we've come up with unique ways to fund these things. Students apply an activity fee. At our school, this is an option, it's not a requirement, but families give $225 per student that's there. This raises roughly $90,000. But this is the way that we buy all our paints, all our copy paper, all the expo markers, all extra books, anything that's not anything, but what the teachers need in order to develop a very impactful educational experience. This comes from our community. This funding does. It's given. Fundraising, auction, business partnerships, right? Working with our community to raise funds. This money that has been raised at this auction is going to buy our textbooks this year. This money is going to pay for student Chromebooks this year. And then working with our parent-teacher organizations. We actually have two at Rilke Shule and make a huge difference. One of them is Rilke Shule Incorporated. This parent organization operates a before and after school program. Big time for a charter school because we don't have transportation. So we need a safe place for our students to stay when their parents are at work. This program alone has funded $30,000 worth of scholarships for students to stay after school to have a safe academic place for them to be till their parents can pick up at 4 or 5 o'clock. In addition, this organization is right now paying for our evening custodian. We don't have it in our budget, right? We're focused on providing educators to work with our students. This parent organization is picking up the bill to cover some of our operational costs. The money just isn't there. And we want something that's impactful and meaningful for our students to experience. Getting back to our community, volunteer time, right? So how do we invest? We either invest with our money or we invest in with our time. So we have volunteers in the building all the time, participating in one way or another. Now, this is recorded volunteer hours. This means somebody actually spent the time to go in and record it on the website. I bet there's twice as many volunteer hours. There are people engaged in our community or engaged in our school all the time at a number of different levels. So facility, coming back around to this, facility costs are so expensive for charter schools. It's a huge, huge barrier for them in their budgets. So we've been working on this for quite a while to secure another facility. As our lease came up, we are paying this year $738,000 just in rent to rent a private facility to operate a school. Fortunately, we've been able to partner up with ASD in order to move into a facility. Once again, those students that are charter schools, those are ASD students, right? Those are AEA teachers. A facility is something that they need to do their job at a high level in order to keep people in the building. So this has been very, very successful. So in summary, right? When our resources are limited, we really need to prioritize on what our vision and mission is, right? Cut out the fluff. What are we about? We're about having educators in the building. We're going to engage and collaborate with our community to problem solve, right? We're going to come up with creative solutions. How can those members of our community contribute their time and their funds in order to develop the type of educational system that they want? Thank you.
Ross has come back up here because we just want to emphasize to people that why, before our last speaker comes up here, that we do have this number available. And for folks on Zoom to look at this number, write it down, enter it into your phone, and start texting some questions because we're almost to the Q&A portion of the event.
888-907-5094. Leave that up for 10 more seconds.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I just taught a full day of school, and all of the words and opinions are my own, not from the Anchorage School District. But my name is Kat Walker, and I'm the 2024 Alaska State Teacher of the Year and a finalist. Oh. Thank you. And I had the honor of being a top 4 finalist for the National Teacher of the Year, which was an incredible experience. This is my 19th year as a STEM educator for the Anchorage School District. My husband is also in his 19th year, and we have 2 children in public school in Alaska. We were the first group in Tier 3. So you are seeing someone who does not have a pension, who won't be able to stay in Alaska much longer because I need one eventually. So nice to see you while I'm here. I was born and raised in Sitka, Alaska, and then moved up and went to Greening Middle School in Chugiak before heading off to college. And we definitely have some current and future issues in the Anchorage School District, as well as the state, which everyone has spoken so well about already. One of the big ones, literally, is the class size, which is going to be on average of a little over 35 for middle and high schools, and that's average. So with some smaller classes, my classes will probably be around 40 for each class. And this year they're about 35, so it will definitely be larger. Students will see a reduction in their choices for AP classes, advanced placement, as well as electives. I'm lucky enough to teach science electives right now, and I love them, and the students love them. A lot of them have signed up for them next year, but we might not be able to offer them due to the large class sizes. I think one of the biggest ones, if you know any middle school students, you know how much they need activity and they need a purpose. We are looking to lose all of our middle school sports and activities, and that is something that might be the lifeline for many of our middle school students who need a reason to come to school and a reason to try their best. I have a photo here of my daughter and her cross-country running team at Romig this year. They absolutely loved it. And high school is slated to lose gymnastics, swimming, and hockey. As was stated earlier, we have a dismally low teacher retention because our pension system is set up, well, the lack of one is set up so teachers can come here and get all the great training that we have, and then they can take it all with them when they get to year 3. So we have over 300 resignations as of April 1st, with 44 leaving in the middle of the year. 40% of our teachers are in their first 3 years. That's a huge chunk. And as soon as they get to that 3rd year, they can leave. So we might not have them around much longer. And 25% of teachers are like me, mid-career. The older teachers, or the teachers that have been teaching longer, have a pension to rely on, so they might stick around, but you are about to see educators just fall off the cliff. They will be going to other places. ASD has turned over 1,800 teachers in 4 years. That's half of our certificated staff. And this year, with educators and admin, we have 201 displacements so far. Many educators I know very well that I see every day, and 2 of our incredible assistant principals have been notified that they no longer have a position. Our assistant principals were some of the newest hired, and they no longer have a job as administrators. They have to go apply as teachers again and hope that there's a job for them. On top of that, which is kind of crazy, we have 128 open positions. We need teachers, and we are displacing teachers who are great at their jobs and telling them to go somewhere else, but we really want them to come back. I myself have been displaced twice. I was teaching next to my husband at Romig. I loved it. I was so excited to have my children come to my school, and then I got displaced. Same year I went to the White House, so it was kind of a slap in the face. And luckily I ended up at Diamond High School, which I love. And I'm very, very happy, but I was not able to be at school with my children. They came through Romig and I was not there. Charter schools are fantastic if people have the means to be there. We just heard all about the volunteer hours and the transportation issues. We need to make sure that we support all of our students. So charter schools cannot be the only option. And the more you have people being able to leave their neighborhood public schools, the less funding those schools have, and the less ability they have to support all students and offer them advanced placement classes that hopefully all of you grew up with the ability to take. Our students won't be able to take them anymore. Often you don't have the full-time nurses that you need for medical needs. You don't have the support for individual education plans, and as we said, transportation. As we know, public schools shape our communities. They allow us to have thriving communities where people have jobs and they have a sense of self-worth and they give back. And one example that I have is a student that I absolutely love who graduated last year. His name's Kevin. And he was in all my clubs and he did all the activities. He loved engineering and he was brilliant. And we had a school resource officer who gave him a task to design a better quick clip connector. And Kevin reverse engineered this quick clip connector, which is used for safe door breaching. And he went through, I think, 8 iterations and hundreds of hours, and he made a really cheap, really good connector that the police department threw him a party at school. They let him breach a door in the back field and the thing blew to pieces, which they used a little bit too much of the explosives, but the kids loved it. And he felt so successful, and he went on to win our statewide wind turbine championship, and he went on to nationals. And to fund his way to nationals, he built accessible phone holders. He designed and 3D printed them for MakeOur Eye Care, so low vision patients could zoom in on their correspondence and read their own mail, and so they could answer it. And he made these amazing corals that turn white when they get hot, so you can simulate coral bleaching. And I tell this story because Kevin, just meeting him, you'd think he was doing great with school. And in reality, he was not. He, in classes where there was tons of students, big class sizes, where he was handed a worksheet, he would shut down and he wouldn't do it. And it was a real big push at the end to get him through high school and get him graduated, but he's very happy now. He's been promoted at work a bunch of times. So small class sizes, specialized classes, and choice really help students be successful. And then hopefully this video will pop up. I am lucky enough to teach a drone class. I have an unmanned aviation science class at Diamond. And we have a 100% success rate for students passing their FAA 107 commercial drone pilot's license. And we try out right here, we're collecting snot from a whale so they can learn how to do science in the field, and they learn all about how drones lower cost and increase safety and increase efficiency. And this class would not function if we had more students. It would not be safe. So it's really important to think about class size and what you're able to do safely in school. And then another activity, we just actually did this today. I came straight from the Diamond High pool, and I need to turn off the sound. That's me squealing. And we simulate careers. So we got a grant from the Alaska Oil and Gas Association, and we simulate careers with oil and gas, like building structures and looking for leaks, looking for corrosion, and cleaning up oil spills. So my marine biology class was just doing that today. And that one I do with my big marine biology class, but it's only, we're only able to do it because we have funding from outside sources, which is a lot of work to get. And it's really hard for the district to be able to support that because we have to go through so many steps to accept grants. But I definitely feel like it's worth it. Ross, I broke it. Thank you. We could escape out of it. So going on to say, I have a lot of community partners. I really love working with Alaska Resource Education, which is a local nonprofit, and they are helping me pilot a natural resource management class. We have found definitely in schools that if students can have autonomy, competence, and relatedness to others, they build that intrinsic motivation. And we do that in schools by giving students a choice of classes, showing them they have a voice, and connecting them to their communities so they can solve real problems. For example, we go twice a year and we clean up beaches near Whittier, and that is funded by the Matson Caring for Alaska grant. And it is free now for students because the community has stepped up to support us. Students bring back the debris and they grind it up, and they work with a local engineer to help make grizzly wood. They had a display here at the museum, which is a recycled wood from marine debris. And students learn all about Patrick Simpson's solution, and then they can think about their own. And I have a student who's college bound right now. He loves college. He's been ready for it the whole time, but being in small specialized classes enabled him to learn he loves film. And he made a documentary on our beach cleanup, which was shown here at the museum and also in Seattle, all over the place. And he's going off to UAF, and he already has some jobs. They're going to pay him to make films for them at UAF. So he learned what he likes, and he's not wasting money taking classes for things that he might not have been interested in. And we also love to do career fairs. We take students on field trips with Alaska Resource Education up to Fort Knox Gold Mine, take students to conferences with the resource conferences, and students learn to peer network and interview, and they build a sense of self-worth, and they see themselves achieving success in the future. Here they are being celebrated with Alaska Resource Education. And I briefly want to touch on funding across Alaska with the schools. On the radio, I like to listen in the morning, and I hear all about things outside of Anchorage. Examples in Sleep Mute, they have been denied for 19 years to fix a leaking roof. And now, of course, they're having rotting support beams, buckling walls, and their school is recommended to be condemned. In Veneti, the electrical wiring is right next to flammable insulation. Thorn Bay has not been able to fix their sprinkler system for 17 years. And in Newtok, they had a bathroom bus. They didn't have working bathrooms in the school, and teachers and students had to go home to go to the bathroom during the school day. So there's huge problems we need to fix. We all can agree public schools make all professions possible, and in reality, they make democracy possible. We can't starve our schools, which is what's happening right now. Thank you very much for your time.
Go back up. So we'll start going with our questions, and thanks for those who have submitted them online. You can keep submitting them here for a few more minutes. I think we'll direct this first question to, and Brenda, I pronounced it wrong, is it Strauch? Strauch, okay. Very German, how apropos. So we'll direct this first one to Commissioner Bishop and Mr. Strauch. So there was a lot of discussion, I think, multiple speakers around selection of charter schools and correspondence schools, and that element of choice and that being important. There was also a lot of discussion, though, about obviously the 50% funding gaps that we have, and sort of challenges even delivering, I think, what we would consider traditional K through 12 and increasing class sizes. So what's the dynamic there? How much should we be really investing in charter programs when we know that 80% of kids are going to the schools in their neighborhoods because that's where they can afford to go and their parents can drive them?
Thank you. That's a great question, and I can
parents, yeah.
start. The legislation for charter schools wasn't for additional funding. It really was a basis for straightening out the language in regard to the ability to have a charter school be heard. As you know, many of the programs at Diamond and others, they actually are choice programs as well. Have my experience in ASD, there's quite a few choice programs right within even public schools that are not public charter schools. And so the idea that those are the only choice programs isn't correct. But what it did want to do, one of the differences in those choice programs is that generally the other choice programs, such as there's some at Service and Diamond, I think, and others, is that really at the administrative level, they're designed there and placed in schools. And the charter school choice generally occurs from ideas from teachers and parents, more at the ground level. And it was those that started them were having difficulty being heard at a school board level. And so the language in regard to charter schools is simply just language, not necessarily funding. The funding for the correspondence schools that were placed, that was placed in the original budget for the governor's budget in the omnibus bill was for the districts who actually serve charter school students to receive more funding for those students. 32 out of our 52 school districts outside of Mount Edgecombe actually have correspondence school programs. And from the data, it demonstrates that families are choosing these. During the pandemic, what we found in ASD was that our own students actually left to go to our own homeschool correspondence schools. Many of them afterwards, actually half, did not come back to their neighborhood schools. They're still being educated in ASD, and they're still using the administrative resources and all the other school resources for special education. So the district system was still supporting them. However, the district was not receiving funding as if they were one full FTE. The funding for correspondence students is 90% on the dollar. So the governor's bill, the present bill actually now, has that each of these students is paid, each of these students is counted rather as one FTE, as a whole student in the average daily membership in the formula, and those funds actually go to the district. They'll be able to claim those. So seeing the transition and the choice of parents moving in a direction actually took money out of school districts and moved it over, even though they were in the same school district, to charters. And so, or to correspondence schools. And in Anchorage, some of those correspondence schools are charter schools. So this was in an effort to see that transition and then have those values that are in that formula go back to the district. And if you're not familiar with the funding formula, it actually all goes into one pot.
Right. I'm going to ask everyone to keep their answers to less than a minute. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, no, I didn't make that clear before. And go ahead.
Would you mind stating that again, your question?
Yeah, the question is essentially at a point in time where our sort of local education funding seems to be almost at crisis levels if you consider how far below we are by the national average. How do you rationalize sort of spinning off some of the students and the resources from our traditional K through 12 to different charter programs and correspondence programs?
Yeah, I would say a big part of it, of course, is family choice, right? People are looking for opportunities, and even pointed out by many of us at this panel, like when students have choices to pursue different educational opportunities, it creates great outcomes for students. And so that's what charter schools are really doing. It's a small, localized community that is providing some sort of educational program that's very unique. And so whether it's a program within a high school or a charter school, families are looking for those opportunities, right? We all want the best for our kids. And so we're looking for those opportunities. And so as those students flock to the different programs, whatever they might be, the funding follows them. Definitely not looking for any additional funding for charter schools. However, charter schools do face one unique challenge that our neighborhood schools don't face, and that's with facilities. Many of them have to rent a facility. And as I shared earlier, that was 80% of our budget at one point, which means that we're kind of operating at like a 0.8 or an 80% of what our funding could be if we had a different type of facility set up. Fortunately, we've been able to partner with ASD here recently, and this is going to be a game-changing moment for us as facility costs will be reduced, and that we can invest that once again into our teachers that instruct our students.
Thank you. So the next question. So there's been a lot of pushback on education funding, both at local and statewide levels for Anchorage School District, and particularly related to the notion that there's too much funding on administrative costs, or different policies and restrictions should be tied to funding in order to achieve better outcomes. The ASD school board was publicly elected to set these policies, but yet there are real concerns from assembly members, legislatures, and the governor that ASD policies and management are not deserving of additional funding, and this is harming our students, teachers, and communities. What changes can Anchorage voters, political leaders, and ASD make to demonstrate our district and students will use these scarce resources in an effective manner? And we will jump, and we can pass it down to Vice Chair Jacob.
Red is on, right? Okay, cool. Man, that's a question and a half. Kudos. So I think it starts with something I included in my slide deck, which is we recognize that legislators, just be it through a knowledge gap or something more, lacked clarity as to how school districts already spent their budgets. The misperception that school districts attempt to overspend on district administration at the expense of classroom instruction is a myth that should be debunked at every opportunity. The Anchorage School District in particular passed an amendment that we covered in my slide deck that specifically said should HB 69 or a $1,000 base student allocation increase be allocated, every penny of that would have gone to something that it was direct instruction or supported direct instruction. It was a spending list that was ready to be purchased, essentially. And I think that impacted floor debate. It also impacted education across the state, frankly. Our school districts like Kenai and Fairbanks have adopted, Kenai is actually adopting a similar amendment tonight at a meeting, as I understand it, to pledge to their local legislative delegation that this is what's already happening, but if you want to see it in advance, here's that peace of mind. So I think it's just a cry for increased communication and collaboration between school districts and their legislative delegation. Maybe we need to pass a law that says every legislator should have to spend a certain number of hours in a classroom every year, and that would cause a lot of heartache to go away instantly.
Thank you. The next one is for Mrs. Walker. You already have the mic. I think that's a great point about people spending time in the classroom. If you were to give a tour of your classroom, your programs at Diamond High School to the governor and the legislatures, what do you think would surprise them?
That's a great question. So we just had Lisa Murkowski come visit, and she learned a ton from the kids in our new National Resource Management course and was able to share with them a lot of what she does. I think, so Kelly Lessons just visited this year, and what surprised her was we had all these ceiling tiles missing because there had been a leak and someone had come in and taken them, and she said, that needs to be fixed right away. And I told her, well, we can't quite fix it yet because the bathroom toilet is malfunctioning down the hall, and when students flush it, all the water shoots out of the bowl onto their clothes, and that needs to be fixed first. So I just run down the hall and I put all this caution tape all over the bathroom stall, but I think just on a day-to-day basis, what we deal with because of our failing infrastructure and our huge class sizes, I think it would really surprise anyone. And it's great to have people come. I love having visitors. I think the students are always a little bit more on top of their game when we have extra experts in the room. So anyone is welcome to come visit at any time.
Great. So now we'll start back here with the commissioner, and we'll go through and do a quick answer from everyone. What's the single most important thing we can do as engaged citizens to advance excellence in our schools here in the state?
I would say stay engaged and keep a focus on what we expect from public education in regard to student achievement and outcomes being what is it that we want them to know and be able to do when they leave us, and are our systems set up to ensure that given the information that we have in the data. Thank you.
Well, I think the community should consider what their priority is. What do you want, right? Coming back to it. And then start taking those small steps towards it. You're not going to reach that goal all in one big jump, right? So let's continue to take small steps. It's going to take time. It's going to take time to make change happen. But if we keep on moving forward with it, we're going to reach that goal. So it's being focused over a period of time and being determined to reach that goal. And can remain engaged, like Dr. Bishop said.
And I'd like to echo the being engaged and visiting schools and seeing what's going on in schools, so you can really understand what students are going through right now. And voting, if everyone would vote, we probably wouldn't be in this predicament. So that's a big one.
And the question is what we can do to stay engaged in
Yeah,
improve
so we have
outcomes?
obviously engaged citizens
Sure.
here. What can we do if we want our
Yeah.
schools to be as best as excellent as they can be at
Absolutely,
this
yeah.
point?
If everyone left tonight, and Commissioner, you're welcome to do the same thing. We emailed our legislature and said, please take actions that educators have expressed are what they want to be retained and recruit new colleagues. The biggest investment we can make in our state in improving academic outcomes is having a qualified and dedicated teacher at the front of the classroom. And if we're going to see improved academic outcomes, that's an investment we're going to have to make. We will have to pay for, and we will have to find a way to get to yes on. And so that's the answer to everything, frankly.
And going back to Mrs. Walker, you missed your pound there. As an amazing teacher that we want to keep in this state, you outlined some of the points in your slide, but what do you think in other teachers? What would you say your top 3 priorities for retention should be?
A pension.
Okay.
I think that's the big one. Small class sizes is always amazing for educators, but I personally won't be able to stay without a pension. And I'd love to stay. I grew up here and I love it. And my husband grew up here and he loves it. And my children love it, but we just can't do it.
Understand. So starting back with, and I just realized I'm calling you Commissioner Bishop, but it's Dr. Commissioner Bishop. No, or Dina. Starting back to this, I mean, I think we'd all love to pour a lot of money into our schools, but we are in a position right now where there's obviously a lot of fiscal uncertainty and people are being measured about what they're spending money on. Is there anything, this is probably hardest to start with you first given your position, but where do you think we could be making cuts to the budget to really make up for and prioritize education?
So I appreciate that. I would not have enough information in regard to in the entire state's budget. The funding for public education is second largest funding outside of the Department of Health for our citizens. And so I would have to take a look at all those different entities if I were to select and make that. But I am sure that our legislators that spend time in that every day have those pieces of information. And that's why this is so tough. Because if one receives more, something else is going to be less, and there's advocates, for that, what is less. Of course, I'm a public educator, and so I like to see the Department of Education get the investments, but I'm also a citizen in Alaska and on a team where there's lots of many needs in Alaska. And so specifically to the state's budget, I don't have enough information on that specifically to be able to answer that.
And I think I'm gonna maybe, well, actually, go ahead.
Sure.
I asked everybody, you can pass it to
you can
Mr. Stroke.
have a follow-up.
Yeah. No. I was just gonna see if I was gonna pivot.
Would you say it then one more time?
Yeah, it was essentially, there's not a lot of fat in the budget, and we all know this. Is there anything that you've identified that you would, recommend be cut in order to make money available for education? It's a tough question. Pretend you're a
It is a
legislator
tough
for a
question,
day.
right?
Yeah.
Like we know that there's not enough revenue coming into the state,
Yeah.
and that makes it really, really hard, right? And as Dr. Bishop said, you're taking money out of one hand and putting it in the other. All of these different functions that the state has are really important, and they serve our communities really well, and we don't want to lose any of them. And so, to me, the question is more about how do we have a different revenue structure in order to provide the things that we want for our state and our communities. And so, I don't know that anything can be cut, right? Like,
Yeah.
we want excellence, and we want awesome communities. We want safe communities that educate our kids and provide all the experiences that we are striving for, that we're aspiring for.
Thanks.
So over the past 8 to 10 years, most Alaska government departments spending went up 40 to 50%, but in the public education, it actually went down about 8%. So we really have cut everything we can cut. We are at the bare bones. And I'd like to refer to Dr. Bishop's words from 2017 in the, from 2022, 2023 Alaska School District, or Anchorage School District budget. She is quoted, she wrote, since 2017, ASD has received flat revenue from the state of Alaska through the BSA formula. Again, the funding mechanism does not account for inflation, which is a real expense.
I think it's a fair question, and I don't fault Commissioner Bishop or anyone for not having a clear answer. The legislature, House Finance Committee, had to pass as part of this year's operating budget that they sent over to the Senate an unallocated cut, which says that we've probably reached the point where we're sawing on bone, or getting close to it. Just the state, the school district, everyone should always work to optimize and make efficiencies. But I think that says something. I think flipping the decision or the question on its head, I'll go back to the need for a sustainable long-term fiscal plan. Our revenue picture, depending on the volatility of oil prices and permanent fund earnings, isn't working, and it wasn't working multiple years ago. The situation we're in now has been a policy choice by the legislature and by our executive branch, and it cannot and should not be used as an excuse to underfund education, point blank.
Okay. And you may comment since you're referenced.
Appreciate that. And I do want to share that the overall money to public education actually has increased over time. The state's share is based on, because I had asked this question, so the state share is decreasing at the same rate that the local contribution increases. So specifically for those incorporated areas, the change is the greatest, where your local contribution is increasing because the state, because of the local value, your base need. So that does take into account some of those funding changes, because I was looking at the data. The additional largest piece is the out-migration, not necessarily out of our state, because from 2000 to 2024, there was only a 4,000 student difference. So about 25 years, only 4,000. The biggest migration, though, is moving from students who get in the funding formula, that move through the funding formula and collect all those multipliers, because the BSA starts at one number, but it grows. When there has been an outflux of about, in the last 10 years, 15,000 students from brick and mortar to correspondence, where you receive no multipliers and only 90 cents on the dollar. So while the student population hasn't changed, the ability to generate money through the funding formula has fallen flat in some districts. And so the part of the governor's plan was to pay districts that additional funds. Now, it's a parent choice that they're doing that. So the mechanisms of the formula absolutely are causing some of these changes. While we haven't had an increase in the base student allocation, it absolutely makes it easier to plan. Absolutely. If you think about your own job, if you knew how much money you had, you would be able to plan for next year. The planning is difficult, but during my last 5 years, with the federal money in there, there's been a lot of money in public education. So it hasn't been without funding. But if we want to count state money, local money, federal money, the overall amount has been there, but it is so difficult to have a balanced budget and think to the future when it isn't built in. That's why we're putting forward information about, let's get this money in the BSA, but also let's have some language that supports growth and achievement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since my name was mentioned, I wanted to have a rebuttal.
Fair enough. And we're getting close to the conclusion here, so I want to end on a hopefully a higher note. If there's one thing for you to tell us, is what makes you optimistic about Alaska's schools over the next 10 years?
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think it's the community, right? It's the people that are here, it's the people in our community that are engaged in it. People care, and people are willing to work hard to get the outcomes that they want. And I think that's our greatest resource in this state is the community that we have here. And when we develop these shared goals and we work towards them, we're going to achieve them. So I think that gives me a ton of hope moving into the future that we're going to be able to come up with solutions, because there's good people in this state and we're willing to work. We need to find those common grounds to work together. But there are things that we can achieve here for the benefit of everyone.
And I'd like to add, we have the most incredible students. The students in Alaska just keep me in awe all the time with their creativity and their problem solving. And they've been through a lot of generational trauma. They went through a pandemic. They really are resilient, and they impress me every day. And the community partnerships have been phenomenal. I wouldn't be able to do anything that I do if I didn't have the support of the community partnerships that fund the activities that I do, that come into the classroom and help me teach. They bring expertise to the room, and those things are huge highlights, but we can't do it if our buildings are falling apart and we don't have the support of our politicians, and we don't have the funding needed to keep class sizes where we can build those relationships and get to know every student and see what they need.
You can.
Okay, I'm sure I'll have
yeah.
to. What gives me hope, I think, in addition to the magic that's happening in classrooms every day across the district, is some of the additional items and policies that we're not waiting for Juneau to lead on. And I'm thinking about potentially wisely using excess capacity in our elementary schools to co-locate childcare, for example, which is a huge cost and could potentially be a driver of retention for educators, especially our next generation of educators. Things like implementing financial curriculum policy, as well as our academies of Anchorage, which are harnessing our business community and helping generate students that are ready to take on jobs that are available in our economy. We've implemented small things like ensuring that every student requires and obtains a minimum amount of lunchtime to eat their meal, which data literally says helps improve academic outcomes. And so there are things that we can do to retain educators, to improve outcomes at the local level, and we're working on those things too. I hope that we have more folks moving the ship with us in the years ahead, and based on the conversations happening in the Capitol today, I'm optimistic that we're headed in that direction.
Dina?
Sure, thank you. I would just go with the people. I think I've been to many, many schools, hundreds of schools, and I think the people in the schools, the families, the students, and especially the teachers and the educators, they make the magic happen every day, and they are the Gemba of the whole public education system. We talk about systems a lot, and we pay systems, but the people are the ones who make learning happen, and young people be able to do the things that they can do as they grow older. So for me, it's educators, and that classroom experience is amazing.
Great. Thank you all for taking us out on a high note here. So that concludes our presentation today. I do want to let you know about a few upcoming events that Commonwealth North is going to be sponsoring, and I'm sure I'll be able to, I was able to navigate the slides on my own. So we are having a virtual economic forum on May 1st, an energy forum on May 20th, and then a member-exclusive event on May 29th. So please, if you're not already, consider becoming a member of Commonwealth North. And thank you for all for being here today. Thanks.